Good evening, good day, good morning, wherever you happen to be. We're so excited to be able to have this time to share with you. And with me, as you know, I'm Bena Kallick, and with me I have three fabulous individual practitioners who have been certified with our program with the Habits of Mind. And they're going to share with you some of their practices and their insights and all the good things that are happening with their students. So I'm going to start by asking you, Janice, would you begin and just your name and just the grade? I guess people are always interested. What is the grade or what do you teach or whatever?
Sure. My name is Janice Mix, and I'm from upstate New York. I teach at Brighton Central Schools. The school that I'm at is a 3 through 5 school, and it's called French Road. So I teach health. I teach health, 3 through 5 health.
Okay, and Debra?
Yes, my name is Debra Barry, and I'm from Marion, Iowa, and I'm at an elementary school that serves students kindergarten through 4th grade, and I'm currently an instructional coach there, so I have the privilege of working with everyone.
And finally, Dina.
Hi, I'm Dina Dormer. I work in the Westchester Area School District in southeastern Pennsylvania, and I primarily work with grades 6 through 12 in the STEM areas, so science, math, computer science, tech and engineering, and family and consumer sciences.
So we've been talking together, and now we're going to share some of the insights and conversation that we've been having. But we invite you, the people who are joining us, if you have a question that you'd like to put on the chat, we'd be happy to try to think about it with you. If you have a comment, if you have something that really interests you that you want us to pay attention to, just feel like although you're not live with us, you're live in the sense that we can read your chat and we can interact with you. So just to begin, I was intrigued with the idea that three of you, when we talked together, how much this work and being in the program with the individual practitioner program, how much that really kind of stimulated your own thinking about yourself. We always say, we want to give it to the kids. We want to make it right for the kids, but we all need some making it right for ourselves as well. And I'm just wondering, maybe Dina, would you mind starting like some of the nice stories that you were telling about how this actually helped you in some situations?
Sure. Thank you. I think through the experiences with students, I started to pay attention more to my own practice, right? Because in order to be present for students, we need to fully show up as ourselves. And I realized a lot of what I was trying to do is just go, and put everything out there to maximize the student experience and not always paying attention to whether or not I was caring for myself. And through the practitioner program, I became much more aware and I started to value the experience that I was having along with the students rather than in lieu of the students per se along the way. So it was really impactful for me. And then I ended up transitioning from one position to another. And through that experience with things constantly changing, man, I'll tell you that the impact that the habits had on that transition and what I'm experiencing now with another kind of round of change has really been impactful and essential. It's really helped me to, develop the skills and dispositions to be able to handle some various changes and have that persistence to be able to remain open to that continuous learning and see what happens next.
Is there any one in particular that kind of jumped out at you? Like, gee, I thought I was pretty good at it and I discovered something?
I thought I was pretty good at listening with understanding and empathy. And then when I jumped into more of a supervisory role, I realized not so much. So a great deal of working with teachers and other professionals, more the adults rather than the students and even teenagers, depends on your ability to listen and really to comprehend and understand and work with someone else, to think interdependently and have the ability to shift and to really take, a back seat in a way to let others take the lead. So I really, zoomed in on my ability to listen more deeply and actively. And it has made a huge impact in what I'm able to do. And my ability to serve, I guess.
Yeah, it's really amazing how sometimes it's easier to listen to the kids than it is to listen to adults. Because with adults, you just want to say, well, for God's sakes, don't you understand what we're trying to do? But with kids, it's kind of, you think that, but you kind of listen a little better to kind of get to know them. But it sounds like you started to really dig more deeply into, if I'm going to work with adults, I'm probably going to have to improve my listening skills and really attune. How about you, Deborah? What's going on for you? Because I know you had a big shift in working with adults as well.
I did. One of the things that I noticed right away when I started the individual practitioner pathway was that I, again, had worked on this with students for a very long time. And I thought, this is great for students. This is great. But then I actually spent a fair amount of time not employing any of the skills that I was telling students about personally. So the key area that stood out for me was managing my impulsivity. I think for one of my first PowerPoint projects, the opening slide was a picture of an open road. And the title of my presentation was Running to Nowhere. And I just remember how my next slide was like this story about being on a treadmill, how I was always busy. I was always doing. I was really doing the do as a teacher. We like to be busy and doing all of the things. But I was just running all the time. I was really, really getting nowhere. So I was telling students all the time how great it was for them, but I just wasn't exhibiting that or modeling that for other adults in my building. And so finally at the end, one of my big epiphanies was we had this exercise equipment in the basement, but I wasn't using it. And so I wanted to be more mindful about using that or finding time to use it. So I'm always a night owl, right? Because I'm up late, get my best work done while everyone else is sleeping. And my husband was out of town and my son was upstairs asleep. And it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, I'm going to get that piece of exercise equipment up the stairs. And I started. I'm not going to lie. I was dragging it around the corner in the basement, ready to go up the stairs. And then I was like, nope, Deborah, you've got to learn. You've got to manage that impulsivity, because you will either put a hole in the wall, dragging that thing up the stairs, or you're going to fall. It's going to fall on you, and then you're going to get hurt. And so even though I was like really disappointed that I couldn't like follow through with my plan, I was really pleased that like I was able to put the brakes on, stop for a moment, and manage my own impulsivity. And so that was kind of my epiphany of how I had always viewed the habits of mind as this luxury that I could never have, because it was my job to share this knowledge or impart it with my colleagues and students. And then I really realized it's a luxury that I cannot afford not to use. So it was really great stuff.
That's really interesting. So, we always say, stop, think before you act. I'm really glad you did, because that does not sound like a good situation, quite frankly. But in addition to that, as you're thinking about that, and both of you or any of you can, of course, answer, but as you think about that, and you start to begin to make this work for yourself, what happens to you as a person? Because you said you're modeling, but modeling sometimes to me means I'll do it because I want them to see how I do it. I'm curious, and I think, Janice, you had one that where you talked about it, where it was internal. It was not just, I want you to see how I do it, but I am actually becoming a different person as a result of what I'm doing. So you use the term that I love, so I'll just remind you, because you said that, wait, what was it exactly? You asked the question of yourself, what cocktail of habits will help me right now in what I'm doing? So to help us know, what was the cocktail that you created?
Well, I guess it depends on the situation. So I mostly work with students, but I have a new leadership position. It's just of the special area teachers in my school. And so if I'm working, whether it's with adults or kids, and I foresee, a potential challenge, then I think, all right, what habits are going to get me through this one? And so then I start thinking of the cocktail I need to make, right? Because we need different cocktails in different situations or with different food. So I would have a different cocktail of habits that would work for me. And I guess for me, labeling the disposition, so to speak, like flexibility or managing your impulsivity or listening with empathy and understanding, helps me decide like which skill am I going to need because it has a name. And so then I can put those ingredients into the delivery of whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And I've found that to be really helpful, and really helpful with students too. You know, I think sometimes I was quick to think I understood what a student was saying, or I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. But then now I've learned to take one step back and say, you know, tell me more about what you're trying to say, because I don't understand you yet. And 9 times out of 10, they're on the mark. It's just that their thinking was a little different than mine, or maybe what I think most people think, but it's beautiful. So that's been really great to ask. And it works great with everybody, right? We all want to be heard when we're speaking. So if I use that with adults, then I also can understand much better. So yeah, I use it a lot. Use it with my mom, use it with my kids.
Well, you know, what's really beautiful, and I just want us to take a few moments to just think about this, because this world right now is so kind of turbulent, shall we say. And I know that mental health is certainly one of the big things that people are concerned with. And Janice, I know that that's something that you in particular, that's your content, that's what you do. I'm wondering about, all of you, as you think about this, what is it that really helps you yourselves to manage feeling perhaps not less stressed, because we can't claim that necessarily, but managing your stress and feeling like you can do the beautiful things you're saying, like listening, Dina, like listening with better understanding, and managing your impulsivity, Debra, and creating these beautiful cocktails of habits that you can use. You know, what is it that helps you to draw upon that? Do you have any ideas or thoughts about that?
I think for me, it's just the familiarity with it, like just knowing that I have something to draw on is like I said before, I guess I'm repeating myself, but for me, in terms of my mental health, I'm always thinking like, well, what do I need to do now to get through this moment? So in terms of feeling differently about a situation or just how to manage it, it's always, you know, what do I need to do now? And honestly, sometimes I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. Like I might know what think I'm supposed to do and what will help me the most. And sometimes I just don't feel like persisting in what I know might be the best, you know, way to go. But I try to stay the course. So that, I guess, is what helps me. And when I look at all the different pieces of mental health and you know, the habits, you have to have the habits to fall in all of them, like for your relationships, you know, as well.
I think for me, in regards to like managing my impulsivity, I mean, whether this is right, wrong, or otherwise, I do sometimes talk to myself. So like I might be in the car and I might be like, oh, Debra, slow down. You better be managing your impulsivity. Or sometimes I will even find myself like saying, you don't want to do that right now. Like, what should you be doing instead? Or will this make this better or worse? And so I think, you know, we have all those acronyms and tricks to teach the students, like stop, think, act. And a group of students I worked with, we added an R to it for STAR, like the STAR method. And we put in stop, think, act, reflect. And so that reflection piece is really nice, because it's like, was that the right choice? How's it going now? Because I was able to stop and think about that. So I think just kind of whether I'm physically talking out loud or just to myself in my head, that type of self-talk is really motivating and really helpful.
And Michelle
was
DeMellis
gonna
has
say-
kicked in and said that she loves the use of the word yet,
Yes.
the power of the word yet. And I guess the question that we're all thinking about is that yet is as good for us as it is for the kids, in the fact that we give ourselves the grace to not have done it yet. Go ahead, Dina.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, I was going to say my initial go-to was metacognition and thinking about my thinking, because thoughts drive emotions, and I've fallen into that trap so many times where I'll find myself thinking about it a certain way, and it ends up making me feel a certain way. And then being able to kind of retreat from that and identify some different things. But I'm drawn back to what Janice said, and it's kind of meeting the moment, right? Kind of using the tools and things that you need in a current situation in the present. And one of the things, as a science nerd that I am unapologetically, that I do a lot of is gathering data through all senses, but I kind of broaden that to think about it as gaining a new perspective. So I might see on the surface a lot of things, but if I pay attention to what I'm hearing and what I might be feeling, or touching and so forth, I gain a different sense of what the situation really is. So I think having the ability to pause and broaden that perspective is really helpful in a lot of situations. Can't always do it in that moment when we're heated, but whenever possible, that's what I try to do. It's just think about it a different way.
And
I
Dan
like
Lorath, as you can see, is reminding us, of course, he's the person who's written this book about this right now, but the whole idea of positive self-talk and how important that is, and also the idea of breathing, just capturing our breath again, just kind of releasing and giving that, and getting into the feeling level. And you're touching on that very clearly, Dina, when you're talking about the idea that you're opening yourself to gather data from all the senses, not to limit yourself to just either listening or talking, but to be really present in the whole moment. It really is so important for all of us for becoming more self-caring, which is something I think we all need right now. As you all think about that, let's just talk a little bit about, as your work is continuing, you're working with adults, all of you are working with adults. And now the question is, how does it translate when you're working with students? Are you modeling this? Are you doing something to make them aware of what you're doing? Talk a little bit.
Well, I was thinking in terms of what Dina was saying. So with students, since I teach health, I work a lot with breathing techniques and being mindful and talking about what self-awareness is versus self-management, and how those are key to anything that you want to accomplish in health. And in terms of the senses that you were talking about, that's actually grounding technique, which I learned some students thought that I meant like they were in trouble. But I don't mean that. I mean, like, it grounds you. So if you look around in the moment when you're stressed, right, and you use all your senses, it's called, a take 5, and you look for 5 things, feel 5 things, listen. So it's using those senses, and it really does help ground you. So with students, I think it fits into, I'm actually presenting at a workshop, at a conference coming up, how the habits of mind meet all the different health standards that New York State, or the national health standards, because you can't accomplish the health standards without really truly having these habits.
And Liz is saying here that she never thought of using gathering data through all the senses as a way to gain a new perspective. And she's going to start working on that. So that's interesting, because sometimes we think that gathering data with all senses is limited to the science perspective of it, but it is, in a sense, it's a neuroscience, what you're doing. When you're gathering data with all your senses to get to your emotions, to get to your kind of feeling level, to know where you are, to feel your pain, to feel your joy, to feel your wonderment and awe, all of that is all gathering data. And the more you are aware of that, obviously, the better you're going to be able to balance all of the things in your own life. But it looked, Debra, like you were eager to say something. Go ahead.
I was just really thinking about how when I first approached this with students, we kind of picked 4 habits of mind just as our big pillars. And we chose managing impulsivity, listening with understanding and empathy, striving for accuracy, and persisting. And those kind of became our classroom rules. I've seen this happen in many cases, but personally, before I was working with adults and I was in a classroom, I used it with 4th grade. And those big pillars really kind of kept kids grounded in a lot of different ways. And how we worked to make sure that they understood those concepts is, first, we spent a lot of time on children's books that would help kind of send that message to them about what each one of those habits of mind could look like or sound like. And then we would try to tie those into day-to-day experiences, whether it was something would happen on the playground or something in the classroom. And I had a couple different experiences with students that would suddenly, you would know if it was making sense to them by how they would transfer that knowledge into other areas. So one day I had a student come in and she said, "Oh, I had to teach my mom and dad about managing their impulsivity last night." And I was like, "Well, what did you mean?" And she had said, like, somebody ran out the door and forgot to pack their lunch. And then she talked how her younger sister was in such a hurry, she wasn't putting the toothpaste on her toothbrush. And so she just wasn't striving for accuracy. And then one student wrote in her journal, and I made note of this because it was especially cute, I thought. So it said, "Dear Mrs. Barry, you are very kind. I like when you come into my classroom and teach about managing impulsivity. I've been going home and sharing with my sister, and she's learning how to manage her impulsivity. She says when someone yells at her now, 'Calm down, you're being very impulsive.'" And so I just feel like, they are very easy or quick to put it in. Maybe it's not easy for them. It seemed like it took me a lot longer to put it into practice for myself than it did my students. And so that's what was so great about that individual practitioner pathway, is that it kind of helped me not only talk the talk, but definitely walk the walk. So.
And Dina, I think you've had experience with, are you working with middle school now? Is that right?
Middle and high school, yes.
Middle and high school. So little kids sometimes are enthusiastic about things, just as Debra is describing or Janice is describing. What's it like for the middle school kids and the high school kids? Talk a little bit about that.
We still do see glimpses of that enthusiasm, thankfully. But we speak to them a lot now about taking responsible risks and remaining open to continuous learning. In the sense that, we're trying to demonstrate that failure is not always bad, right? And that we can learn from situations where we've made mistakes and maybe things didn't go perfectly as planned, or we predicted an outcome and a completely different outcome occurred. So we're really trying to push the idea out there that there are many ways to get to an end or an outcome, and that, experimentation is part of the fun. It's part of the exploration and the learning process. So we're trying to build upon what we already know, and find those opportunities and situations to be curious and to have that wonderment and awe. And that's something that I think is really important as students get older and older, and even into adulthood, is recognizing those situations where things just still say, wow, like, that was really cool. And again, instilling that curiosity and demonstrating that it's okay to want to know things and to want to investigate a little bit more.
And I guess in your STEM program, that's very clear, isn't it? Because it's such an inquiry-oriented program.
Very much so. I mean, we're basing a lot of the work that we do on the design thinking and the engineering design process, which, as we know, is very iterative. So there are always opportunities to improve. And Debra, you mentioned earlier the power of reflection. That is so valuable in everything that we're trying to do.
So Janice, I know that you use a chart to remind the kids. Talk a little bit about how you use that chart and what you do.
So when I'm starting to teach a lesson, or the kids are going to do group work, I often turn to one side of the room. The students are kind of at seats that they can pivot. So I have all three fronts. And when I'm standing near the habits, it's on a big bulletin board. All the habits are there. They're 13 by 13. There you
There
go.
you are, Janice.
So I stand on one side of that and I say to the students, all right, we're about to do some group work. And I'm wondering what habits of mind you think we might need for our group work. And they, come up with several. I usually say, let's pick 4, because they will go on and on. I love that about them, but they will go on and on. And so they have to pick the habit and say why they picked that habit. Or we're doing we're learning about advocacy. So then I'll say to them, what habit do you think might help somebody with advocacy? And so they might say well, taking a responsible risk, because it feels like a risk when you're going to be an upstander. So they use it in that way. And the board really, really helps me. And I think it helps them. My students are new to these signs. Some of them said they were nostalgic to the old symbols, which I thought was really cute. But I said that we had to be flexible and open to continuous learning. And so now when I pick the habits too, sometimes we analyze the picture. I'll say, why is this picture with these words? And that's fun for the kids also, to try to learn the new symbols or pictures with the words as well. But the board has been like a lifesaver, especially when it was new to me. Now it's not, but years ago when it felt new and the habits felt new, having them up there really helped me remember to teach with them and remember what they were.
So Janice, one thing I'd like you to just speak for a moment about, I think I'm right in the story you once told me anyway, about the fact that these kids came from the K2 school, Council Rock, to your school. And
Yes.
they talk about how you didn't know the habits and how the kids brought you to them.
Yes, that is very true. So I don't know if I remember exactly how they taught me about them, but the 3rd graders know them so well. And I think probably a kid would say, well, that sounds like this habit of mine, Miss Mix, so I was getting exposed to it and then really wanted to teach it because it's such a the habits are so powerful and they integrate wonderfully into any curriculum, really. But I did notice, and it's getting better. I am so well on this journey, but I did notice that by 5th grade, the kids didn't know the habits as well. So because it was just me I didn't even know them. But once I started teaching them, and then I realized it was not all the teachers in the school were teaching them, it was sad for me to see by 5th grade, many students had forgotten, depending on who their teacher was. But I'm happy to say that has changed and changing at a good speed now. So I finally have gained some momentum with that. And I'm so excited. All the health teachers teach the habits of mind now. There's no K, 3 through 12. And now I have all my special area teachers teaching 2 new habits a month. They wanted 2 new habits. I did not tell them, but 2 new habits a month. So that's great because yes, Andrea wrote woohoo, those Council Rock kids are awesome HOM ambassadors. They really are. They come, as you know, it's a nationally recognized school. So they come so ready. We just have to jump on and keep it going. And I think we're finally really there now.
And it's beautiful that when you took the program of the individual practitioner, it got you able to do the kind of training and development of some of your colleagues to make that happen. So your leadership has really been exceptional, and that's wonderful. So we're very proud of that school. And we know, in case anybody is interested, if you're coming to the conference in April, you can visit Council Rock and see how it rocks. So we're really hoping that people will be coming in April to our conference. But let's go back for a minute, because Debra, James Anderson just wrote and said what a powerful approach it is to be able to have the kids start with the problem and then see which habits help. Is that how you do it with your STEM approach, for example?
Well, I think I know like Janice just talked about this with her board, and then I'm not sure what Dina does for her STEM students, but I noticed in fourth grade, we would have the teachers would kind of select which habits they wanted to focus on in their classroom. So that's maybe a little bit different way of thinking. So James's idea is really giving me something to think about here in regard to maybe approaching it with give them the problem first and let them decide which habit. I think as students become more embedded in the habits of mind, they're going to draw on their past experiences and their past knowledge. And that will definitely, I think, be a way that we can measure how they're growing in depth in those habits. So that's something that I definitely want to take back with me as we continue to move forward.
Dina, you want to add to that?
Sure. From the STEM perspective, I mentioned earlier the engineering design process. In a school district where I used to work, we were developing a program at the elementary level, and we actually embedded the habits into the design loop. And that was a really cool experience. And the students were be like, I asked questions, and I posed a problem today. And like they were just really referencing to what part of the process they were engaged in at the moment. But what we found is that their metacognition really sharpened. Like they were much more aware of what strategies worked for them and which ones didn't. And in the school district where I am now, we're tapping into that a lot more. Our math teachers are meeting with students, having student conferences, and they're trying to help the students learn like metacognitive skills. And what the students are sharing in those meetings is that they're engaging in a lot of the habits that they weren't necessarily aware of, which is really cool because we can help them to gain that awareness and then be more intentional with their practice.
It's really interesting. You're reminding me that years ago in South Fayette, which is also a certified school, one of the things I remember as being so interesting was that the person who was doing the STEM work there, she had a survey, and the survey was the 16 habits. And she asked the students before they started their project, which was using design thinking, before they started their project, she said, okay, here's the 16 habits. Just rank order the top 3, just the top 3 you think you're going to be using the most. And then we'll start. And what was the most frequently chosen as the top was creating, imagining, and innovating. After the project was all complete, she went back and she said, let's reflect now on this and tell me which of the habits do you feel you actually use? Not the ones you necessarily projected you were going to use, but actually use, which was the most important. And by far, the students said, managing impulsivity. So they were humbled to realize that creating, imagining, and innovating takes discipline. And that innovation and that discipline that it takes to structure your way through something, to do a really creative, innovative project, you really do have to keep putting a brake on it and allow. So you're not so creative, Debra, walking up the staircase carrying a big exercise thing on the back.
Yeah,
I imagine they found humor in some of those moments as well.
Definitely. And I think what we're demonstrating here is that you really can't just put the habits of mind in silos. They do touch on the toes of each other often. And you really almost can't employ one without another. And I think that's also powerful. I was really reflecting this morning on some things I might want to say. And I think one of my big epiphanies that came about after completing the individual practitioner pathway was that the habits of mind require a lifelong commitment. And so if you just learn about them and then put them on the shelf, they're not going to stay with you. So we have to be mindful to continue to attune to them. And I think what's really neat about the habits of mind is they, if you give them appropriate time and space, they are helpful in the transitions of life. And that is maybe something that I didn't consider prior to being part of the pathway.
Yes. And if you know, I think because you know me, and I think you know a little bit of Art Costa, my colleague, that the co-author of the work, that we are aging, 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 and we still don't get it right all the time. It's just so frustrating. But it's an ongoing life development, and every new phase of life, you meet the challenges and you begin to realize that. Andrea has asked Dina if you could talk to us a little bit more about the, let's see what she's asking, the strategies your math teachers are using, because she said, we have some high school math teachers flipping their toes into habits. And I think, oh, I love that, dipping their toes. I thought it was flipping their toes, but that's good. And I think you could learn from your colleagues. Do you have maybe one good tip? And then if there are more, maybe we could send Andrea some.
Certainly. We have a few of our, math teachers and math specialists having, again, the individual conferences with students in which they're really looking at a few math problems from a recent assessment and saying, well, how did you try to solve this problem? What about that process worked for you? What if we looked at it a little bit differently? Like, do you see a new pathway potentially? And really doing a kind of a number talk strategy in a sense of offering some different possible ways to solve problems and figuring out which one of those clicks the best with each individual student. And also having conversations about what are your sticky points and why are they sticky? And is it this huge area, or is it something much more defined and smaller within that? And what we're finding is that the students are struggling in these really well-defined areas and not these humongous, like broad ranging topics. And just that's making the students feel better. It's helping them to build their confidence because they don't feel like, they quote unquote stink at math as a whole, right? I just need help with dividing fractions. That's a whole lot easier for me to admit as a student than it is like, oh, fractions, no go. So just those are some of the things that we've seen, and it's mostly with our middle school students that we're having the most in-depth and profound conversations right now.
So have you written anything about it, or is there any stuff that you can share
we haven't formalized any of this. It's very much in an early stage of just some strategies that we're trying because we really want to dive in and help our students in the best ways possible. And one of the best ways that we're finding out is to talk to them.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we have a reference for each of these people, Janice, Debra, and Dina, in terms of the emails. And if you have other questions, you can write to us at the Institute. We'll try to help you network with each other because we're all about figuring this stuff out together. And I think maybe we're ready, unless anyone else have one last word before we hear something special.
So,
well, I set us up for it, so now we got to have it, right?
Uh-oh.
Okay, Dina, we won't stop with you. We'll all come back and enjoy it. But
okay.
Dina, give them the background as to how you thought about it and what role it played.
I very much, a lot of things will just pop into my mind and everything turns into a song. Like a single word can trigger a song for me at any point in time. And when I'm particularly inspired, as I was after the individual practitioner program, I sometimes rewrite song lyrics to kind of represent the experience. So if you will bear with me, because I am not a vocalist, I did write a Habits of Mind song to the tune of I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And I will do my best to get through it. At first I overreacted and I freaked out. Let my emotions drive me wild with all sorts of doubt. But then I managed impulsivity and responded with wonderment and awe. And I thought about my thinking and learned how to fix some flaws. So now I strive for accuracy. I think flexibly and persist through the things that challenge me. I gather data through all my senses and apply past knowledge to new situations as I think interdependently to create and imagine innovations, take a responsible risk, try something new. Ask a question, pose a problem, and find some humor to. Remain open to continuous learning and make some tough decisions. Remember to think and communicate with clarity and precision. Oh, well, I practice habits of mind. I listen with understanding and empathy and always strive to be kind. The habits give me strength and allow me to stay true. So I will be my best self and do anything to help you. Hey, hey.
Yay!
You did
Fantastic.
it.
I mean,
Beautiful acapella, and you did it beautifully. Thank you, Dina. I so appreciate it. And if you would like to meet in person these three wonderful women, plus many other wonderful educators, join us at the conference where we're all going to be there in Rochester in April. And we hope to see you there. And have a lovely Thanksgiving.